She leaned across the gallery aisle, smirked right in my face, and whispered, "You came alone? You really thought you could defeat us with no lawyer, sweetie? You're finished." My mother-in-law, Evelyn, truly believed she had stripped me of everything: my home, my dignity, and my late husband's legacy. She thought I was just a quiet, submissive housewife who would crumble under her expensive legal team. But as the courtroom doors swung open and the honorable magistrate walked in, the entire room stood up. Before taking his seat, the judge looked past her high-priced attorneys, stared straight at me, and said with sharp respect, "Good morning, Colonel." Evelyn's arrogant smile instantly froze. Her attorney's pencil dropped to the floor, and his face drained of all color. What my mother-in-law never knew was that for 15 years before I met her son, I was a senior JAG officer prosecuting high-level military fraud. And today was the day she paid for every single lie. My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 42 years old, and for the past 5 years, the people in my life thought they had me completely figured out. To my mother-in-law, Evelyn, and her favorite youngest son, I was nothing more than a quiet, submissive, small-town woman who had somehow hit the lottery by marrying her son, Mark. They looked at my simple clothes, my reserved nature, and the quiet life I chose to lead in our modest suburban home. And they mistook my composure for weakness. When Mark passed away suddenly from a heart condition, my entire world shattered. But while the ink on his death certificate was still drying, Evelyn wasn't mourning. She was calculating. To her, Mark's unexpected passing wasn't a tragedy. It was a long-awaited financial opportunity. Within days of the funeral, the subtle condescension turned into an outright declaration of war. Evelyn made it glaringly obvious that she viewed me as an uneducated outsider who had no right to Mark's estate, his successful logistics business, or even the home we had built together over our marriage. She genuinely believed that without Mark around to shield me, I was just a defenseless, financially dependent widow who would crumble the moment she exerted a little bit of pressure. She thought I would simply pack my bags, hand over the keys, and disappear into the background without making a sound. She had no idea how wrong she was. It didn't take long for Evelyn to drop the facade entirely. Barely 2 weeks after the memorial service, a process server knocked on my front door and delivered a formal legal summons. Evelyn was suing me for full control over Mark's estate, claiming that our home, his business shares, and his personal savings belonged to the family trust, a trust she insisted Mark had created before he ever met me. Accompanying the summons was an official statement from a prestigious, high-priced corporate law firm in the city. The tone of their communication wasn't just formal, it was outright patronizing. The lead attorney, a man who clearly thought his expensive suit gave him authority over my life, made it clear that they intended to drag this through court until I was financially ruined. He strongly suggested that I save myself the humiliation, waive all rights to Mark's assets, and accept a tiny, insulting settlement to cover my moving expenses. They expected me to panic. They expected a frantic phone call, tears, or a desperate plea for mercy. What they didn't realize was that while they were busy drafting threats, I was sitting at Mark's oak desk in my home office, carefully reading through every single line of their digital claim. To an average person, the legal jargon might have been intimidating, but to me, it was as clear as glass. They had made critical assumptions about who I was, and in doing so, they had left massive, careless holes in their argument. I didn't call their office. I didn't cry. I simply opened a fresh notebook and began analyzing their strategy with the cold, tactical precision of a veteran trial lawyer. Over the next 10 days, while Evelyn and her legal team celebrated what they assumed would be an effortless victory, I went quietly to work. I spent my late nights sifting through years of tax filings, bank statements, and corporate deeds. I requested certified digital records directly from the state registry, tracing every transaction tied to Mark's business over the last decade. It didn't take long for the truth to reveal itself. Evelyn wasn't just trying to take what she believed was hers, she was trying to cover her tracks. Buried beneath layers of shell companies and vague accounting entries, I discovered that Evelyn and my brother-in-law had been systematically siphoning funds from Mark's business accounts for over 3 years. Worse, the family trust agreement they had filed with the court was a blatant fabrication, a claim retroactively registered and stamped with a suspicious notary seal dated just weeks after Mark's death. They had forged his signature, banking on the assumption that I would never look closely enough to notice. Any other grieving widow would have hired a high-powered law firm to handle a defense like this. But hiring an attorney meant filing formal motions, serving notices of discovery, and giving Evelyn's team an early warning about what I had found. I didn't want them to fix their mistakes. I wanted them to walk into that courtroom completely blind, brimming with unearned arrogance. I filed my response pro se, representing myself, making sure my court entry looked brief, basic, and utterly non-threatening. I let them believe I was an unprepared target walking straight into their trap, completely unaware that I was the one laying the foundation for their destruction. The morning of the hearing arrived, heavy with gray clouds and a biting chill. I walked into the county courthouse wearing a tailored dark navy suit, carrying a single structured leather briefcase. When I entered courtroom 302, Evelyn was already seated at the plaintiff's table. She was flanked by 2 high-priced corporate attorneys who looked as if they had stepped straight off the cover of a legal magazine. Her brother-in-law sat beside her, whispering with a smug grin. Evelyn looked up as I walked in alone, her eyes sweeping over me with cold, ruthless satisfaction. As I made my way to the defense table, she leaned across the center aisle, smirked directly into my face, and whispered loud enough for the gallery to hear. "You came alone? You really thought you could defeat us with no lawyers, sweetie? You're finished." Her attorneys didn't bother hiding their amusement either. One of them chuckled softly, adjusting his expensive silk tie as he reviewed his tablet screen. When the bailiff called the room to order, the lead attorney stood up with a theatrical air of confidence. He informed the clerk that this would be a brief, uncontested proceeding, casually pointing out that the defense lacked legal counsel and had submitted only minimal paperwork. They sat there grinning, convinced they had already won the day before it had even officially begun. The heavy oak doors at the front of the courtroom swung open, and the entire room stood up as the magistrate entered. I kept my gaze fixed forward, my composure unwavering, while Evelyn and her attorneys practically preened, ready to put on their show. The judge walked up to the bench, set down his tablet, and adjusted his glasses. But before sitting down, his eyes scanned the room, bypassing Evelyn's multi-thousand-dollar legal team entirely. His gaze locked directly onto me. A sudden spark of recognition lit up his face, followed by a look of profound, unshakable respect. "Good morning, Colonel Bennett," he said, his voice echoing clearly across the silent courtroom. Evelyn's arrogant smile instantly froze on her face. Her lead attorney froze mid-gesture, his pen slipping from his fingers and clattering loudly against the wooden table. He turned to look at me, his eyes wide with utter confusion, his face draining of all color. "It has been a few years since the Fort Bragg Tribunal, Colonel," Judge Harrison continued, taking his seat. "I see you're representing yourself today. Though given your track record as senior trial counsel for the JAG Corps, I doubt that presents much of an issue." What my mother-in-law and her legal team had never bothered to discover was my past. Before I met Mark and retired into a quiet life, I had spent 15 years as a senior military prosecutor, specializing in complex federal fraud and white-collar military crimes. I wasn't just a lawyer. I was a seasoned colonel who had dismantled sophisticated criminal syndicates in military courtrooms across the globe. And the predator they thought they were cornering was about to turn their entire trap inside out. I stood up, holding myself with the sharp, effortless authority of a career military officer. I didn't glance at Evelyn, nor did I waste time with emotional appeals. Instead, I approached the podium and submitted my official exhibits directly through the court clerk. "Your Honor," I began, my voice calm, steady, and commanding. "The defense moves for an immediate dismissal of the petition, alongside a referral to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation." Evelyn's lead attorney practically scrambled out of his chair, stammering an objection, but Judge Harrison silenced him with a single raised hand. Over the next 20 minutes, I systematically dismantled their entire case with surgical, unforgiving precision. I didn't just present arguments, I presented an airtight forensic audit. I laid out certified state registry records proving that the family trust cited by the prosecution was an outright forgery, complete with a fraudulently applied notary seal. I produced bank transaction logs detailing 3 years of unauthorized, systematic embezzlement carried out by Evelyn and her youngest son, drawing hundreds of thousands of dollars out of my late husband's business accounts into offshore shell companies. Every single piece of evidence was cross-referenced, meticulously indexed, and backed by undeniable federal standards. As I presented entry after entry, Evelyn's lead attorney slowly sank back into his chair, staring at the floor in complete horror. He realized in real time that his clients hadn't just lied to him, they had submitted fraudulent claims in a court of law, exposing his entire practice to severe judicial sanctions and potential disbarment. Evelyn sat completely paralyzed, her jaw dropped, watching the elaborate financial empire she had built on lies crumble in front of everyone present. Judge Harrison didn't hesitate. He slammed his gavel down, the sharp echo ringing through the courtroom like a gunshot. The petition was dismissed with prejudice. Not only was I awarded full, undisturbed ownership of Mark's estate and business, but the judge formally ordered an immediate freeze on all of Evelyn's assets, referring the evidence of forgery and embezzlement directly to the state prosecutor. As the gallery began to clear, Evelyn stumbled out into the hallway, her face pale, her arrogant facade completely shattered. She reached out a trembling hand toward me, trying to stammer out a tearful apology, begging me to think of family. I stopped, looked her dead in the eye, and calmly said, "You forgot that Mark wasn't the only one who protected this family. I did too." I walked past her without looking back. Within 6 months, the state prosecutor filed criminal charges against both Evelyn and her youngest son. They were forced to liquidate their personal property just to cover restitution and legal fees. Meanwhile, I chose to honor Mark's legacy by managing his business with the same integrity and strength he always carried, ensuring it thrived for years to come. Standing up for yourself isn't about revenge, it's about refusing to let dishonest people rewrite your story. If you were in my shoes, would you have given them a second chance? Or pushed for full justice? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the video on your screen right now for another unbelievable story. Thank you for watching.